Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys a multi-mirror version of the Spark build that is almost as good as it is going to get, and is probably my last video for this patch, at least in regards to a build update for this character specifically. We were able to dodge the nerfs entirely, so I figured might as well just push the build to the absolute limits. Pooled a bunch of money with different friends, borrowed a lot of different gear from different people, and kind of slammed it all together, and this is the end result. The damage it was already disgusting, and now it's even more disgusting. I got the mana up to 10,000. The DPS just sitting here is 1.5 mil. There's a lot of ways that I could cheese this. I could be like, oh look, I put this down and sacrifice my guys and start spamming, and you know, we get up to 3.8 mil, whatever. You could put on Rising Tempest, get it to 4 mil or some crap. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. T4 Zest in a group of 2 man has about like 90 million HP, died in literally one hit. I don't even know how much damage I'm doing. I might be doing over 100 million. Who knows? Who cares? Build Blast. You can do maps and just slam Temporalis on. Still got 9k mana, still got a million DPS, and you just fly through the map and annihilate everything. Obviously, this is an extremely expensive version of the build, and it takes an extremely long time to get to this point. I kind of just wanted to show you guys what is possible and kind of just give my take on what I think is like overall the best version of the build. Obviously, if you don't have as much currency, feel free to check out my budget build video. I made an entire build with just 1 divine that could do T15 maps very easily. And if you just scale that up to 10 divine, I mean, you're going to annihilate everything. But also, I have been doing a lot of build coaching and help with people, so feel free to join my Discord if you're interested in that. I've helped, I don't know, I have like a little feedback channel here, but I've helped probably over like 80 people or so far. It's been pretty nice. This is a paid service and is a little bit expensive, and I'm probably not going to do as many with the Diablo season coming out, but if you do need help, feel free to just DM me on Discord and we can talk about it. So let's just get into, let's just get into the build. This is not completely a guide because almost nobody is going to be able to replicate this because it is so exorbitantly expensive, and I'm going to show you guys all of that. And I want to say again, this is not all of my currency. I'm not some oil prince. I don't have 5 trillion divines. This is the culmination of a group effort essentially to set this up, and an enormous amount of farming. It's also very particular to how this character is set up because a lot of the stuff in the skill tree is kind of weird. So I'm just going to go one by one and just talk about random stuff. So not a whole lot has changed since the previous video that I made, other than just like a crazy amount of optimization. I decided to go for Morior Invictus. The reason for this is it just gives a ton of mana and attributes, and now I'm stacking a little bit of int. I have about 7k or 700 right now. It's nothing crazy. I'm not even 100% convinced that this is better than a normal chest. I just decided to try it out, and I was fairly happy with the stats as a result, and it ended up working out pretty well. I think a normal chest is relatively similar in power, and it's way easier to set up because you can get resist on a normal chest, and you can get spirit on a normal chest. I'm running cast on shock on bosses, and then when mapping, I just put on blink and I slam on Temporalis. And the reason that I'm able to do this is because I have an amulet with 40 spirits and a helmet with a spirit corruption. If I didn't have Morior Invictus, I wouldn't have to have the helmet with spirit corruption, and then the helmet would be way less expensive. And you could get way more resistances, therefore you could get, as you can see, I have resist soul cores in here. You could get a little bit more mana that way, and you can swap stuff in the skill tree. I've set it up both ways. I think they're relatively similar in power. Morior Invictus maybe edges it out when you have literally perfect gear. Otherwise, a normal chest is about as good and infinitely easier to set up. That's one of the biggest changes and why my mana is up to 10,000. And the DPS is up just because of having insanely high crit chance, and we just got like a really insane wand and stuff, and I'll go over gear in a sec. But my crit chance is 50%, crit damage is nearly 600%. Obviously, people are going to say, oh, you don't have any rarity. You could literally just swap. I have 1 million mana soul cores. You could swap every mana soul core for rarity. Boom, you have 100% rarity. Please stop talking to me. It's very easy to get rarity if you wanted it. This is to showcase the damage potential. For supports on here, I pretty much always run Inspiration, Acceleration, Consider Casting, Arcane Tempo, and Lightning Exposure. A lot of people do non-crit. I think non-crit is just bad. I don't think you can get to this much damage non-crit, and there's a lot of stuff that is conditional crit damage that is also not represented in this number here. But with PoB being out, there is a lot of math to be done there. I don't really have a lot of time for that right now because of the Diablo season coming out. But if anything drastic changes via PoB knowledge, then I will update the build. Anyway, I'll stop yapping now. Other gems that I have Orb of Storms for bosses, and what I do on bosses is I just put on Overcharge, so I have higher shock magnitude, and then I put Lightning Exposure back onto Orb of Storms. Otherwise, for mapping, I just always have the exposure, because I have 50% increased exposure, so constantly just applying that is quite a lot of damage. And then on bosses, I do Cast on Shock with Lightning Conduit, Elemental Focus, Impetus, Energy Retention, and Inevitable Critical. Considered casting no longer works for this, nor does Concentrated Effect, so this is just what you use to make it do pretty good damage. And then for mapping, I just activate Blink with Ingenuity, and usually I just run around with Temporalis. I don't even really need the Morior Invictus, and I could swap some stuff around, but I kind of just wanted to make this number get as crazy as possible, and my goal was 10,000 mana, and I got it right on the dot. So I'm happy with that, but ideally, if you have this much damage, you don't need more, so then you just put on the Temporalis, and you just fly around in maps, and that's what I'll show you guys with gameplay. Archmage, you just want it to be level 20 with a +1 level. Oh, I also forgot to mention Spark. Corrupt levels actually work now. Prism of Belief Diamond still doesn't work for some reason, or I'm stupid, I don't know how to use it, but it doesn't seem to work. It just increases the level, but not the damage. But corrupted levels do work. So this is a level 21 Spark with 10 levels from gear. And then we have Archmage, of course, Conductivity with Cursed Ground and Heightened Cursed. And then the Skeletal Cleric is for the weapon swap thing. If you pull out your second weapon, and then you have the Skeletal Cleric bound to your second weapon with +2, you use Soul Offering, Dance Macabre, Ablation, Persistence, and this gives you a nice little damage increase there. Nothing too insane. Oh, that was from the Surge of Power, but I'll here. Surge of Power, and then kill those guys. Yeah, see. Nice little damage bump. Only really useful for bosses, don't need it for mapping at all. I'll just go over every piece of gear and talk about some priorities and stuff. Again, this is disgustingly expensive. Please don't try to copy this. There are way cheaper versions that I have posted on my channel and are in the build link down below. This build is also not going to be posted in a build link, but if you want help with it, just DM me on Discord. Anyways, wand. This thing is the best wand in the game. It literally is perfect. It's a mirrored wand. Not much to say about it. Crit is very good. Cast speed is insane. 5 levels. Max mana roll. Max spell damage roll. I mean, it's literally perfect. I wish I could talk more about it because it's disgusting, but yeah, this gives you, when I equipped it, it gave 300,000 DPS by itself, so that is pretty insane there. Focus. This thing is crazy expensive as well. Lightning damage or spell damage in the prefix. Mana is good. 2 levels of spell skills mandatory. Crit chance, I would say, is mandatory. Cast speed, a little redundant because my cast time on Spark is 0.18. Don't really need to be that low, but it does make you do more damage, so that is nice. An alternative to cast speed, you could have crit damage or intelligence, and that would be way cheaper and probably more reasonable to go for. But I wanted to make the number bigger, so hey, that makes the number bigger. The main benefit of playing pure mana, of course, is that you don't have to use a Everlasting Gaze anymore. You get to use a normal Amulet, and then we get one with maximum mana on it. Level of spell skills, this could also be projectile skills. Crit chance. I had to get all res on the suffix here because my resistances were pretty bricked with Morior Invictus. Crit chance is okay. You could get crit damage as well. You could get intelligence, all attributes, and you can get higher flat mana, but this one's pretty good. I have Spaghettification anointed. I'll talk about that in a second because it is not actually ideal. 99% of the time you will anoint a Wild Storm. Obviously, Morior Invictus with % increased mana, % increased attributes, and then throw in all soul cores. Ideally, I'd have all mana soul cores, but I needed the resist, so I went for some all res here as well. Helmet, I got a Spirit Corruption one, and then you just want mana, intelligence, and ideally I'd have higher intelligence. I'd say this is one piece that could be improved, but getting Spirit Helmets is very, very hard. Rarity's okay, right? But you could supplement rarity elsewhere. And ideally, I'd have another resist, because then that would make the resistances less nightmarish. And then one of the main ways that we are able to get so much mana is, of course, a high-rolled Ingenuity belt with a Dream Fragments. And then Dream Fragments can get Corruption of all res and crit damage. All res might be better in this scenario because then I wouldn't have to use the all res soul cores here, and then I could go for higher mana. From a damage perspective, the crit damage might edge it out a little bit. I'd have to run the numbers or just slam it into POB, which I haven't done yet, but crit damage corruption is very nice, and that's getting multiplied via the Ingenuity, and of course this gives immunity to freeze, so then I can use a Stone Charm, and it gives a ton of increased mana. And then the other ring is a Breach Ring. Ideally, I'd have mana regen instead of fire res, but if I take this off, my fire res is literally in the negatives. And this thing is disgusting because it has lightning damage, max mana, cast speed, int. Like, this is nearly perfect. It's corrupted, so I don't think it can be mirrored. I don't know what the corruption is because I got this already being corrupted, but this thing's pretty crazy. Gloves, high energy shield, mana, crit damage you can get on gloves could be up to 30%. Intelligence is good, and lightning res. And then boots, 35 ms. Intelligence, double res, high mana. Those are all pretty nice. Melting Maelstrom Mana Flask is mandatory for this because you can see my mana drains fairly quickly, and then if I spam the Flask, boom, instantly full mana. Particularly good against bosses when mapping. It's nice when using Temporalis because blinking around costs mana. And I'll showcase that when I do the map gameplay. The problem is, if I take Morior and Invictus off, then I don't have enough stats to satisfy the requirement, so I don't like hot swapping between them. Because I needed to get to 10,000 mana, so usually I would have these as dex and strength, but right now they're int. Getting into the skill tree, this is very particular to how I have it set up, but the general gist is we don't need energy shield stuff, so we just gain an enormous amount of damage, and I stacked a lot of int. This would even be better on a Gemling Legionnaire, because a Gemling Legionnaire has the double benefit from int stacking, so you'd have a lot more mana. You wouldn't have the exposure, the double shock and stuff, so from a damage perspective, I'm not sure, but you would get more mana. I'll just give a general overview of what's going on here, and I'll talk about some very specific things that we got going. So I just went for a lot of damage. I saved some points by not going through this and just grabbed int so I could get more points later. Some spell damage stuff. I like this node for chance to shock with lightning conduit. And then I grab a whole bunch of crit stuff. A lot of crit stuff. This for the all res. I opted out of these, which I go for 99% of the time, but that's so that I could get to the bottom of the tree, which I'll show in a sec. You put a controlled metamorphosis diamond here so that you can only have to spend 1 point for pure power, 1 point for lightning quick, and then 1 point for controlling magic is quite a lot of damage. And this frees up a shit ton of skill points so we can go further down into the tree and get more crit stuff. And then I have Eldritch Battery, of course, Arcane Intensity, a bunch of flat int stuff. I opted out of prod speed. You could go back into it, but blinking around and stuff, I don't really need it. Acceleration is enough prod speed by itself, I think. And then some crit-related stuff. Really good crit-related stuff here, paired with a Against the Darkness Time Loss with max mana intelligence. This could also be, instead of max mana, it could be, or intelligence, it could be Spirit for notable passive skills, and then you don't have to have Spirit Helmet or Spirit Amulet, but that is nice. And then I have Spaghettification here anointed so that I get another 4% int and then another 7%. And then I just have all these points talented so that I get a lot of mana. I have Wildstorm here, and that is because of a diamond that I have here, which allocates Wildstorm and Mana Blessing. You cannot replicate this because this is the only one that exists, at least that I've seen so far. Is this ideal? Probably not. It would probably be cheaper to have one that is Mana Blessing, Spaghettification, but there's a lot of stuff you could get. You could get one that gives you pure power, so then you don't really need the Metamorphosis diamond here, so then you gain a jewel socket and a skill point, or you can get Mana Blessing and Spaghettification, whatever. The reason Mana Blessing is nice here is it gives me 3 skill points. I don't have to go down here. And then Wildstorm frees up the Anoint on my Amulet, so then I just decided to Anoint Spaghettification. I go all the way down here for a lot of jewel sockets, more crit. These nodes are pretty insane for crit, especially because it gives int and strength, and strength basically turns into more int. Go down here, and I got these nodes for move speed and just cast speed, which is pretty nice. Grab even more jewel sockets, and then I went for Polymathy here. Polymathy or Polymathy, who knows. 10% int is pretty nice. I don't have an insane amount of int, but it's 70 int, and then you get a bunch of all attributes, which then just gives you more int as well. You could also just get a Megalomaniac that allocates Polymathy, or whatever. You could also get one that allocates Breaking Point, Storm Charge. There's a lot of really good stuff on the tree, but these are expensive, and this is very hard to replicate. The jewel sockets are pretty important. Mine aren't insane. These are probably like maybe 5 to 10 div each or so. You want Magnitude of Shock as most important, and then I get double crit on everything, and where applicable, I tried to get a corruption. You could have it with quad stats, and the 4th stat could be like prod speed, elemental damage, spell damage, but those kind of don't exist. Getting the crit is just more important, and you want at least 2 recover 2% of mana on kill jewels, and instead of Magnitude of Shock, Magnitude of Ailments is good as well. It just isn't as high of a roll. And keep in mind that magnitude of shock does not apply to this number here, and I have an enormous amount of shock because I have so many jewel sockets. This number is mainly representative of all of the crit that I have stacking, and most of my jewels look like this: crit damage, spell damage, magnitude of shock, crit damage, crit chance, crit damage, magnitude of shock. And I'll just show the rest of them. Crit chance, crit damage, and then we got crit damage magnitude, triggered spells, fire res. You can get a lot of res on these, but they're very hard to find. But this one doesn't have magnitude because I needed the fire res, and it was the only one I could find. This one is intelligence. Ideally, all of them would have intelligence corruption, but can't always get what you want, right? Magnitude of shock, crit, and then mana, crit, magnitude of shock. Pretty nice there. In terms of like options or stuff you could swap out, chain is pretty nice, but not really necessary. I could swap out of just some raw damage to go for the chain if I wanted to. I kind of just had a goal in mind of 10,000 mana and 1,000,000 DPS. Kind of heavily exceeded that number, but here we are. Other nodes that are good, like these nodes are pretty good. 2 points here for some cast speed is good. These nodes are good. Going into this for instant cast speed is like kind of okay. Not ideal exactly. These nodes are good. I typically go for them, but right now I didn't exactly have all the skill points, and I am level 96. And then usually I like this node, but I decided to opt out of this in order to get the movement speed and stuff here. But generally speaking, this node is quite strong. It's 20 crit and 40 LE damage if you've dealt a crit recently, which is quite nice. And I'm considering swapping this one node to this node right here. That might be slightly better, but not by an amount that I think matters. Anyway, that is the skill tree. Now I'm just going to run the juiciest map that I can find, and I'll just show you what the build looks like with Temporalis. As you can see, I can't put on my Morior Invictus now because my Dex and Strength aren't high enough, so all I would have to do is just swap 1 or 2 of these into Dex and Strength. But you can see my stats are still 8.5k mana, and I still have 1.2 million DPS with Temporalis on. And this is how you clear maps and level up really quickly. And that is what I'm going to do. So I'll grab a map. This one looks pretty ideal, but I have to do all these maps to get to it. So you guys better like the video so you appreciate that I'm doing how many... I wanted to be Irradiated and Corrupted and Breach and Boss. This is the only one I have on my map. So I'm going to grind a bunch and get over there real quick. Alright, we have made it to the map. This is the map that I am going to run. Nothing insane. Well, the last 16 that I had in my inventory. And just to show that everything on the character is the same. You could optimize around Temporalis probably a little bit more, but not that big of a deal. I kind of just slam it on. And there it is. My cat is sleeping on me, so that's fun. She's lovely, but makes playing a little bit harder. But yeah, Temporalis has a bit of a high mana cost when you're playing with it, so you just use the mana flask here and there. Just because Archmage makes Blink actually like cost mana every time you do it, and it can be a little expensive, but that's what the mana on kill jewels are for. If I was playing with this like all the time, that's a lot of money right there. If I was playing with this all the time, like 10 hours a day or something, I would put on another mana on kill jewel probably, just to make it a little safer. It's already really safe, but just for like peace of mind, I suppose. This is a pretty terrible breach, I think. A lot of loot right there. A lot of loot right there. Oh my lord. Okay. Pretty good. Temporalis is very, very quick. And this is kind of a nice supplement because Choir Storm got nerfed. So you can farm pretty quickly with this. Chain is pretty nice when doing like breaches, but otherwise I'd say Chain is pretty useless. So you can see that, you know, in really high density you can just blink right into the mobs and just everything gets mowed down, pretty much insta-killed. This is with like extra monster life, all sorts of crap. This is a very interesting map for a breach. Cool if I got a 10 breach Savannah the other day with like 1,000,000 XP. Holy crap, that was insane. So pretty good on the clear. We aren't a Deadeye, right? So everything doesn't get instantly one shot across the entire screen. You could make an argument for I'll just not loot because I'd rather get gameplay. You could make an argument for like Widow Hail projectile speed, but you lose an enormous amount of damage. And oh, look at this bug, by the way. Sometimes with Temporalis, your character like bugs out, and you like get stuck slow walking. You can make an argument for Widow Hail with high projectile speed and Pierce for clearing. You lose a lot of damage, but maybe you gain some clear speed. I don't really think it's necessary because everything kind of just instantly dies, and if you're casting enough, your sparks just mow through everything anyway. You could maybe make an argument for using Pierce Gem, and then here we have a boss. So normally what I would do is just I just unclick Blink and then put on Castle Shock and then just one-shot it, but I'll just show the damage normally. Like, you really do not need to do that against normal bosses because they just don't have any freaking health. Especially if you just put down like Conductivity, and if I did literally anything at all. And what's nice about the Mana Flask, obviously you can see my mana is low here, but when the boss spawns, I'll just press my Mana Flask, and then the boss should die. And it died before its health bar even showed up, so yeah. I mean, there you go. You don't... Oh, perfect jewel. The rich get richer, boys! You don't need Castle on Chalk for bosses like that. In maps, the Castle on Chalk is really just for cheesing like high tier bosses, right? And for maps, you can kind of just stay like this. Obviously, this is very, very high level of the build, but the map bosses just have no health, so it just doesn't really matter, right? Yeah, this is pretty good for just efficiency and just farming really, really quickly. You could obviously add in an enormous amount of rarity to it if you wanted to. You could do 10% there with the Soul Core, 10% there, 10% there, 10% there. You could get 30% on the gloves. You could get rarity instead of the cast speed here. You could get rarity here. But if I just replace all my Soul Cores, that would be 70% rarity just right there. And then I already have some of my helmets. That would be 100%, and that's pretty much all you need. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the video, I think. Build can do literally everything. It's disgusting. I kind of just wanted to show, because I've seen a lot of videos, I kind of just wanted to show what I think is the best way to set it up, because I think crit scaling is very good. And this is the highest that I personally have seen the damage, and while retaining high mana. And I mean, I'm still at 1.2 million DPS with Temporalis equipped, and still can annihilate everything. But that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Time to sell a lot of this. Yeah, have a good one, guys. Peace.